It's time for Myth of the Week.
Awesome. So I really love this myth of the week this week. We were doing a hotel a few years back, and one of the inspectors was like, "Oh yeah, you got too many cables in here," and I'm like, "What?" He goes, "Yeah, you can only have 3," and I'm like, "What?" I was like, "Where does it say that?" And so I kind of went back and forth with the inspector, and "Oh well, I'll let you get by with it this time, but don't try not to do it or whatever." And I'm just like, man. I was like, I really don't see an issue with this. And then looks like we got another Oscar in the house. Awesome. 2 Oscars showed up. Awesome, guys. Uh, but yeah, so I thought it was kind of bizarre. I'm like, what would be the reason for them saying this? And so I asked the AHJ, I asked the city inspector, and he was like, you know what? He goes, that's a good question. He goes, I'll bring it up at our meeting on Tuesday. So I hadn't heard back from him. He hasn't been back for an inspection, but I will get an actual answer from my city inspector to see what he says about it. Because I was just interested, and I was like, I don't see why it's such a big deal. Because I feel that what they're doing is they're taking the language of 334.80 that applies to NM cable and then trying to apply that same to MC. There is a 330.80B, I believe, that does indicate something about MC cables going through stud holes. But like I say, this one's really interesting. I don't see a issue with this. I don't see why you couldn't just pack that thing as much as you could fill in there. I think you might be limited by the 20 current carrying conductors from 310.15, but just a real interesting one, and I wanted to bring it your way, James. We've been doing a lot of bundling. We'll probably just keep doing bundling until we get through all of them, but I figured this would be a good one for you to slam dunk on.
Okay. Yeah, I'm used to getting a lot of these. It's funny because being an instructor all these years, I've already had this question asked before, and when you had told me about it, we were talking the other day, and I said, "Oh yeah," I started telling you everything. I said, "Yeah, I've already heard that one." And
Mm-hmm.
you were right. When you get over and you look at 334.80, that's where somebody gets in and they start talking about the type NM and NMC cable, and uh, they try to apply that, and that's where you're getting down into the second paragraph where they talk about that. And what it says there, when you have more than 2 NM cables containing 2 or more current carrying conductors installed, and this is going to be a key word that we're going to talk about here in a minute as we get into others. But it says without maintaining spacing between the cables through the same opening in wood framing that is to be sealed with thermal insulation caulk or sealing foam. Okay.
Yep.
Now, that is where you're going to look at this. Okay. And they try to take this. Now, I want to bring up an analogy that's sort of the same thing. When I was instructor for NFPA and we first started teaching 70E, we had to pull back on a couple or most instructors. I think there was three of us that were allowed to teach it because they were doing sort of the same principle that they're talking about here. And what happened was when they would take and you would take and apply one of the hazard risk categories that was in table 310.15 CA, and you started looking at that, they would say, well, just pick out a similar task and similar type piece of equipment, then you can apply that group. No, you couldn't do that because there were parameters that were underneath, because I was on the task group and we did that, and there were certain parameters you had to meet. You just couldn't say something that's similar and then go apply that. That's sort of the same thing you're getting here. If they meant this exact same terminology as here, then it would have been over in 320 and 330. Okay. And it's not. So I just wanted to bring this portion up because I knew this is where it might come from here. And then you got the third paragraph, you get the same thing. And then you're going to see it talks about looking at table 310.15.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to mention too is that in that 33480 where it says more than 2 NM cables that are installed where thermal insulation is sealed, and that's a big thing there because a lot of times the residential AHJ and this is what I went over with the AHJ, and actually he's not the AHJ, he's just the representative for the AHJ, but I went over with him like, hey, I think they're trying to apply this to MC cable as being similar type cable, and then with the sealing, the insulation, the reason you do that in residential is because they don't know which one of those exterior walls are going to get sealed. So most of the time in residential now, with all their energy codes and everything, they're going to basically seal thermal insulation on all those exterior walls, so they don't want to sit there and pick and choose like some of the other guys do and say which walls need sealed, which walls you could do 2, which walls you could do 3, and which walls you could do 4, whatever. They just rather you just do 2 on all of them, and they don't have to sit there and spend a lot of time picking through them. So that's why they do it in residential that I've seen.
And then if you look at 320.17 and 330.17, it talks about where you're just based on the picture you had there's why I did this, where you're installed through or parallel to framing members. It refers you to which sections. 300.4 A, C, and D. Okay? C, we're not going to take a look at. So, and I brought this up the other day when you asked me, I said, when you're going through that hole, that doesn't have anything to do with it. Because all you need to do is be what? 1.25 inches away. And as long as you're maintaining that, you can run as many through there as you want to. Okay? True. And that was one of the things I brought up right away when Bill and I were talking about it. Now, when you go over and you look at D, and it talks about cables and raceways parallel to framing members or furring strips. Okay? This is where they're talking about both exposed or concealed locations. And if you look here, if you're at the nearest outside portion of the service, how far you need to be away? 1.25 inches.
Yes, sir.
Same thing. Now, this is where I find everything. Now, since that's the case, I'm thinking, all right, now, the only other thing that could apply here is if I had the cables and they were what? Bundled. Because as far as I know, the only thing I'm recognizing here is I need to be 1.25 inches away from the edge of the stud. That's it. All right. Now, when I come in and I look at my adjustment factors, you're going to look at 310.15 CD, and it's going to talk about adjustment factors. And it says it shall not apply to AC cable or type MC cable under any of the following conditions. And 4 is the one you're going to look at. And it says not more than 20 current carrying conductors are installed without maintaining spacing, are stacked, or are supported on bundle rings. Now, if you ran 3, 4, say you ran 5 in there, and you had 5 current carrying conductors in there, let's say the neutrals were, that's only 10. Right. So where's my problem here? I don't see anything that hurts me on bundling, but let's look at exception number 4. If cables meeting the requirements up above, where more than 20 current carrying conductors are installed longer than 24 inches without maintaining spacing, are stacked or supported on rings, a 60% adjustment factor shall be applied. Now, this is where you've got to look, and you're not maintaining spacing, and that's where they can hit you on it. Okay? Right. And therefore, I would say, now, if I'm just going through the hole and then I shoot off and I'm not over 24 inches and I'm going feeding a plug, maybe one going down here and I got 2 running up, whatever, however I'm running them, I don't see a problem with 5 going through the same hole as long as you got that 1.25 inches. But now, if I come in and I look at that and I've got them going across, say 5 studs, 4 studs, 3 studs, I've got 24 inches. And I consider at that point it's bundling because you're not maintaining your spacing. You see
Yeah,
what I'm saying?
that was funny, David. That cracked me up. Speaking of hockey sticks, shout out to my nephew Moose. He's playing an international hockey tournament for Arvada. So go Arvada. They're gonna be playing all weekend. I'll be streaming it. All his games on my Facebook
That's cool.
thing. So my news feed. So check it out. Go Moose. They his first game today. They tied 1-1. So it's a lot of fun. If you guys like hockey, they're 14 and they're pretty intense. It was fast and furious today. So if you guys like hockey, check it out. So sorry to interrupt.
But anyway, so what I would look at, it depend on how it was installed, you know, but it has nothing to do with the hole and how many are
Right.
going through it. It has to do with the bundle and if you maintain the spacing from the edge. And that's the only
True.
things in the code that I'm aware of as it applies to this rule right here. So the answer is actually true and false. It just depends on the type of installation. But looking at your illustration, I would say you're going to have to do something with that because you're bundling at that point because you didn't maintain spacing because you were over 24 inches.
Right.
So then it would become a problem running 3 of those cables in there, AC cables or MC cables. And that's the way I would look at this